G'day and welcome to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. Today we're going to go through the midfield rankings, the top 40 rankings for draft, and also useful for classic. Let's go!
Hodge has done it from nowhere. Hoisting the goal from inside the 30. Sheed from the boundary. Dusty.
G'day and welcome again to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Casey, and you can find me on Twitter at Ball Boys Fantasy, and joined once again, Luke Rogerson in mid-season form today, mate. How are you?
Good. How goes that intro? Hey, every time I hear it, I just fucking
the commentary, the music. Yeah, you gotta love it.
It gets you going. Even if you're a bit flat, you get up when you hear that intro. So.
Well, I hope everyone else feels the same way because we like it.
It's a throwback in the sense that particular song was used for one of the AFL promos.
One of the ads.
I can't remember when it was, but takes you back.
I think they had the Matadors and the Bulls and stuff running
Jonathan
around.
Brown was in there.
That was the
Brownie. It was good.
Back in the day, yes. All right, midfielders. So we've done our midfield classic podcast this week, talking about the premiums, talking about the mid prices. And today we're going to go a bit more of a deeper dive into the top 40 rankings. So this is a draft rankings video, but like I always say, it is very useful, I think, for classic owners, for people to see exactly where I kind of put, or where we put.
You could say all of that.
Well, I did this list. You're also going to give your opinion as well. But where we put these guys that you might be considering for your classic team and how close they are away from the quote-unquote top 8 or whatever it is. So, should we just get stuck into it?
Let's get stuck into it, mate.
We're going 40 players deep because obviously usually we draft a few more midfielders than any other position. So we're starting at tier 1. Now in the defenders, what do you got going on? You're right?
Cat hair in my water bottle. That's what I got going on.
So in tier 1 of the defenders, we had one player. But in the midfielders, I think that there is a bit more of a blanket, so to speak, at the top. So I've got 5 players in my tier 1, and I think any one of these players has the chance to be the number 1 overall player in AFL Fantasy, and especially the number 1 midfielder. So at number 1, I've got Jordan Dawson. 2, Andrew Brayshaw. 3, Marcus Bontempelli, who was the winner of this comp last year. Tom Green at 4, and then Errol Goulden at 5. I think those, to me, are fairly consensusly the top 5 players. You might have them in a different order to what I have them in, but do you think, is there anyone that separates themselves out of this group of 5 to you?
Yeah, on first glance at that list, I don't have any problem with who's there, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about a few guys who maybe aren't there, because I reckon that there'd be some people out there who might look at names that fall into this next tier, guys like Merritt, guys like Laird, that potentially, I think, may have been gypped. What's your sort of justification for how you separate these tiers?
So I feel like these guys in the tier 5, I feel pretty confident that all of them are going to be a 110, which might be in the same ballpark as those guys that you mentioned there.
Yep.
But I also feel that all of these guys have the potential and the ability to go, for example, like a 120, if everything kind of aligns for them. Whereas I don't feel like those other guys do. Okay. They might all have a similar kind of floor, but these guys' ceiling, 3 of the 5 of them are quite young players in Brayshaw, Tom Green, and Errol Goulden. They're all, coming into sort of their, for some of them, 3rd year, 4th year, 5th year in the AFL, so still got lots of experience to gain. And then players like Dawson and Bont, I just see as like those prototypical guys that tackle, mark, accumulate, impervious to tags for the most part.
Impervious?
Yeah, mate, throw that in your dictionary.
Fucking you beauty.
I just think that they've got another ceiling level compared to those other guys, but I mean, I could be wrong, obviously, but this is just how I see it. Do you think, personally, if you were to do this, would you put them in there? Or there was actually one other player that was in this list that I did remove, which we'll talk about in tier 2, who on a per game basis, I think, matches it with these guys, but there are a few issues to consider.
Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about. I think the one who probably stands out to me there is Zach Merritt. I think Zach Merritt's that guy who is capable of getting to that 120 season, whether it happens or not. My guess is as good as yours. But last year, 112.9.
Yep.
So he's there or thereabouts.
He's in amongst where these guys are.
But that's the thing with these things. If you're on the cusp, you very well
Yeah.
could fall into that other tier, couldn't you? So
The reason for Zach Merritt specifically why he's a bit below these guys is the splits with him with Parrish playing in the team versus Parrish not in the team.
Yep.
Suggests to me that he's more of that 109, 110 guy.
Okay.
And those games where he played without Parrish kind of pushed him and elevated him up where he was more of that 115 guy. So
fair call.
I'm assuming that Parrish is going to be healthy for most of the season, although he has had a few injuries. But he is pretty close to this tier, I would suggest. So.
Beautiful. And then let's reveal tier 2, and who's that particular player you're talking about as well?
Yeah, so tier 2, so we've got, again, another bunch of players here, which suggests that mids are going to be, there's going to be a lot of them at the top here, but they all are still all kind of, I think all of these guys are 105, 106 plus averaging players, maybe even all of them close to that 110. I've got Zach Merritt at number 6, so close to that list. Rory Laird. Clayton Oliver was the guy I was talking about before. We'll talk about him in a second.
Yep.
Darcy Parish, Tim Taranto, Josh Dunkley, Jack Steele, Zach Butters, and Connor Rosie there at 14. So that is 6 through 14 with those rankings there. So Clary Oliver, to me, he's one of the best in the business at what he does.
Yeah.
I've said before that I think he's one of the most untaggable players in our game. But there's a lot of uncertainty about what he's going to be doing this season, especially this preseason. He's not training with the club at the moment. Now, we don't know a whole lot, but when you're picking at the very top of the tree and you've got other gun players to choose from, even though I think that quite comfortably has the talent to be in tier 1, I've just bumped him down to this tier 2. And you might even, depending on when your draft is or how much more information we get close to the start of the season, he might even fall a bit further than this list. But on Jan 17th, say something comes out and he's going to be training with the team next week, then he could easily bump back up to tier 1. So it's a bit of a tough one to pick, so I've just kind of popped him in there for now.
Yeah, okay. So, let's say, just for interest's sake, there is a guy that, the word coming out, maybe they're going to miss the first couple of rounds, but that they're a premium. Well, how do you play that in draft? Like, how does that sort of work?
It's a good question. It's I guess it depends on the nature of what they're missing. Are they missing because of a suspension that is a definite, they're out for 2 weeks, and they're going to be back in round 3? Is it an injury that is reported to be there by, week 6, but there's a little bit of more vagueness to that? Or is it something like this, which is completely, we've got no information, we've got no precedent for this, and it's just kind of lingering there? The more uncertainty there is around something like that, the more I'm likely to drop them back down. So if it's only 1 or 2 rounds, 1 or 2 games, I probably would only drop them maybe at most 1 round or so, if anything. But if it is like a more, an interrupted preseason, because that then starts to impact whether or not they're going to be even playing at their best when they are playing, because we know how important preseason is for AFL players. So so Clayton Oliver's situation is a tough one, but at the moment I've got him at 8, but very obviously open to move him around. Is there anyone from this list that maybe stands out to you? I think maybe some might think Jack Steele at number 12, Butters at 13, and Rosie at 14 are maybe a little bit higher than you would expect, or? Yeah,
potentially. I had a bit of a chat. It won't have been released yet, but I had a chat with Bales last night, particularly about Jack Steele and on one of his podcasts, and I actually found some interesting things. I mean, Steele obviously popped in that 2021 season for the massive 120, but we know that 120s over multiple seasons are not really sustainable. You know, some players have, but it's not something you do for a long stretch. Either side of that 121 season was a 110 season. The season before was a COVID 90, but let's call it a 110. And then we know that obviously dropped off a cliff last year with a 99, but we could sell ourselves to stories of injuries. So when I actually look at Jack Steele, I don't see maybe the regression that it potentially looks like, because I see 3 really good quality seasons and I see an injured season. So to me, I can actually sell myself on the story that, well, Jack Steele's just had 1 injured season.
I can quite easily sell myself in that story too. And I feel fairly confident that he's going to bounce back up to at least above like that 106 kind of mark. And with everything going well, 110, 111. So.
That's it. And I mean, I've got my classic hat on because it's sort of what I prefer. But if he gives you 110 in classic and you pick him at 99 as that underpriced premium,
100%. What about our guy from our Richmond Tigers, Tim Taranto? Because he had a season of 2 halves, and if it was the first half Timmy T, he'd be in that tier 1.
Oh, of course.
If it was the second half Timmy T, he'd be probably down at tier 4.
Yeah.
So I think that it kind of there's a narrative there with Jacob Hopper in the team and what he averages with him there versus games where he's not there. I do think that is something, but I also don't think that he's going to be solely the guy that we saw at the end of last season. I think he still had some really good games at the start of the year with Hopper there, so I still think he's going to be that 10. And even prior to the season, we kind of projected him to be like that 107, 108. I kind of still think that's what he's going to be. And he just had a few games where he's playing above his head, which kind of gave us the false insecurity that he was a 120 guy for the rest of the season, and captaincies were made redundant and all those sort of things.
We do tend to buy into the hoopla a little bit. I think the new coach factor is always something to just be aware of, I guess.
A little bit cautious,
Yeah, so maybe when you've got a guy who's had not a great back half of the season, now he's got a new coach, can you really put him in tier 1 of your midfielder rankings when there's just that little bit of uncertainty there? But like you say, if you flip that season, we're looking at it completely differently, aren't we? So it's hard to tell.
It is funny, the sort of the timing of when these things happen. So that is tier number 2. Before we move on to tier number 3, guys, just a reminder, if you haven't already, please hit that big old subscribe button if you're watching over on YouTube. And if you're over on the podcast listening along, give us a 5-star rating and review, guys. Always appreciate the kind words you guys have to say over there on Apple Podcasts and all the 5-star reviews that come through on Spotify as well. So thank you very much for doing that. Tier 3, it's got our guy here.
No question about it. I am ready to get hurt again.
Luke Davies-Uniacke, I have ranked at 15, and at 16, I've got a player dropping, which I don't know if this will be a popular opinion, but I have Caleb Sarong coming back down to the pack a little bit more. He had a massive breakout last season, but I actually think Hayden Young might affect him. At 17, we've got Christian Petrarca. 18, Sam Doherty. 19, your boy, Noah Anderson. And 20, Sam Walsh. 21, Tuke Miller. So there's a few, I guess, classic relevant names in this part of the rankings here. Talk to me about your thoughts on someone like an LDU, and do you think that this is about the right spot for him? Do you think he should be higher, lower? Where do you think he would be in your books?
I think it's interesting the names that you kind of put around him there. So 15 LDU, and then you've got Sarong and Petrarca below. It's interesting because I look at LDU at his best in the same bracket as Sarong and Petrarca, if he's doing what he can do at his best. But for me, it's a little bit of a risky pick with what we potentially know about his body and a potential lack of thirst as well. So I think that maybe at this tier 3 here, he's the speculative of the picks. And then if you wanted something that perhaps might fill you with a bit more confidence, perhaps someone like a Petrarca or Sarong gives you that kind of certainty. Is that kind of a fair call to make? Or
yeah, I will say that this is my projections in terms of where I think they're going to be at the end of the season and my, what I think they're going to average. I think that you're going to be able to get LDU a lot later than those two players if you're doing a draft. I think Sarong will by far be the earliest pick of those three. And I would imagine that Petrarca might be well ahead of LDU as well, especially with the Oliver news and all that sort of thing. And there's a bit of rumor about him potentially getting forward status and all that kind of thing. So I've got LDU in front, but you probably don't have to pick him there. I still think, though, that LDU being the man at North Melbourne bodes well for him versus someone like a Caleb Sarong who has to share with an Andrew Brayshaw. And they both did it last year, so he has that. But then you throw in a Hayden Young into the mix as well. And there's a little bit more downside if Freo do change up their game style a little bit, because obviously they had a disappointing season last year. If they go away from a bit more of that, chip mark kind of game style, which they've done for the last few seasons, then that might affect someone like Caleb Sarong a bit as well. But again, I do expect that people to maybe disagree with that one because he did have such a good last year, and he's still very young. But there's just a few little warning signs I kind of see there for Caleb Sarong.
Okay.
What about number 20 here, Sammy Walsh? I've got him just above Tuke Miller, 2 early buy round players. Again, popular players in Classic. Right behind your boy in Noah Anderson. Do you think that they're in a similar group with these guys, or do you see them maybe separate, or what are your thoughts on those guys?
Yeah, I think they're probably, I know you've got them here in the same tier, but I would agree on the order that you've got them. I feel safer about Petrarca and Sarong as well, and then I feel safer that if LDU gets a consistent season, he'll average more than those guys as well.
Right.
There's little flags with Walsh and Miller on, some previous injuries, just how well they can bounce back from those as well.
Walsh with the role, potentially wing, half forward.
Yeah, and just noting as well that when he did come back and Carlton were playing good
Carlton
football,
different game
it
style.
didn't bode well for scoring as well. So
because I know a lot of people are very quick to pencil in Sam Walsh as like a 110 guy. And I know he's getting a lot of buzz in Classic, and that's fair enough. I do really, really love the player. And if he was in a good role and a good game style, I think he has the talent to be. He has the talent to be in one of those top tier 1 players, but the stars kind of have to align for those things to exist. And I just don't know if they're going to align for Sam Walsh. But yes, I do have him as a top 20 mid, with Tuke Miller just outside. Let's go to tier 4. And this one, again, another bunch of players. A lot of these tiers are pretty chunky. Number 22, I've got Carl Amon, who I do want to talk about. 23, Tom Liberatore. 24, Stephen Canelio. 25, Brad Crouch. 26, Lockie Neal. 27, Josh Kelly. And 28, Adam Treloar. Luke, I'm calling this the old man tier in tier 4. The guys that are guns and just get it done. But there's, I would say, limited upside based on age, with the exception of the guy at the top of this tier in Carl Amon. And after our mid-pricer podcast that was released, which if you haven't, go and check that one out. It was a very good one. You talked me around to Carl Amon a little bit in Classic.
Don't listen to what I say,
Well,
mate.
I don't know. You got your finger on the pulse this season, I reckon. Luke Hatt, remember?
It's just, projecting good things, thinking positive thoughts.
And so I went back and looked at the season numbers, or the numbers that Carl Amon had the back end of that season when he was playing more of that half-back role, taking kick-ins. And fucking hell, he has some gaudy numbers there. He was
some big numbers.
Big numbers. I think from his last 6 games, when he moves into that half-back role, he averaged 112.
Yeah. And
so 2 things. 1, the scoring's obviously gone way up. I don't know if 112 is realistic, but his previous average of like mid-80s. And 2, defender status on the cards. Early word is he is training as a defender at the moment. So he's a tough one to rank. He could easily find himself in the next tier if we see good things in the preseason.
Yeah, we both predicted Hawthorn to hopefully be better this season as well, and I think Hawthorn being better probably equates to less uncontested marks and junk marks around the back. But I did see someone tweet, I can't recall who it was, sorry, but I agree with them in the sense that maybe even if Hawthorn's uncontested marks drop, it might impact some of those other guys rather than Amon. Because
I think it's more likely to affect someone like a Sicily, for example.
Yeah.
Because Amon's more of that, and I won't profess to have watched a whole bunch of Hawthorn and Amon specifically, but he strikes me more as that guy that's up the back of stoppages and like that meters gain kind of player.
Yeah,
versus
he's
the
providing.
switch.
He's providing the run and bounce, and so I think that's the guy that you want the ball in the hands of. So it's maybe I think he did junk it up a little bit in those 6 games. Yeah. I think there was a very high uncontested mark rate, but we're looking at a guy that's priced at, I know draft, this is irrelevant. Sorry, I put my Classic.
But the average, if you're sorting by average, it will be relevant because he's going to be lower and he might be a bit of a steal.
Notice him there. But I mean, priced at 86, a guy that, if in that role, I'd be reasonably confident that in that role he could do 100.
Yeah.
And that's not the worst amount of value.
So if I price or if I order the midfielders via average, Carl Amon comes out as the 46th ranked midfielder.
Yeah, so
I've got him at 22. So if you're ordering your draft by average from last year, have a look at Carl Amon and remember that I do believe and watch him in the preseason that if everything is going the way that I think it will, he should be able to pick up defender status. And if he does pick up defender status, that's a top 6 defender really. Definitely someone that after that podcast, I went back and did a bit more research and I'm a bit more keen on him now. So he is in there, like I said, with a bunch of old fellas there. Tom Liberatore, Cogs, Brad Crouch, Lockie Neal, Josh Kelly, and Adam Treloar. Is there anyone in this tier from those old boys that grabs your attention the most? I know you're a big Josh Kelly fan. Are you still a believer? Still holding on.
I've been heard a couple of times now. I think you've got them reasonably appropriately ranked there. There is obviously that little age flag, and then with some of them, you've got a little injury flag there as well. Treloar and his hamstrings, he's a guy that could come out and put on just a massive season.
He had a big stretch at times last year.
We know he's a good player, but I guess that...
A little bit cautious.
Yeah, I mean, that's another good question because I don't know a great deal about draft, but how do you factor in that injury concern and how far does that drop players in your opinion?
I do think it needs to drop them decently far, especially in amongst tiers. So, you see, for example, Adam Treloar. I've got him in this tier, but he's at the bottom. That's because I'm probably the least confident in his ability to be healthy than all of these guys.
Yeah.
So even though I think his average may be the same or higher than some of these other guys, it was higher than Josh Kelly's was last year, but he's at the bottom because I'm the least confident in his body. And in draft, you pick a player, you got him for the season.
Yes.
Like, you can't trade him out and trade someone else back in.
And if they're injured, they got no value on the trade market, do they?
Zero. So you're going to have to put a bench player to cover him. So I do think it is definitely something you want to factor in. I'm usually not a big guy that's like easy and quick to slap an injury-prone tag on someone.
The old Tagle.
The old Tagle. Put him on the table.
You don't want to be tagled by Mitch.
But someone like Treloar who's had consistent, repetitive hamstring soft tissue injuries.
Yeah, soft tissue is different too.
And at your age, when you cross that 30, 31 years old, those things are definitely something I factor into.
Bro, I found when you cross 27, your body's fucked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Falling apart, man. Especially you have a kid, and I laughed it off because people were saying, once you have a kid, you watch out, like you'll start feeling it. You're up and down off the ground all the time. I'm fucked, man.
Mate, you're training for a triathlon. I don't know what you're talking about. You're crushing it.
Just barely, mate. Take me out the back, I reckon. Turn me into glue.
Baby bump over here. You heard it first.
Yeah, God, I've been hard done by it. I had a baby, you see.
Yeah. Give yourself some slack,
my body's the one that's taking it hard. Jesus. Don't let Brooke hear this. Fucking hell.
All right, tier 5. Little mini tier here. I've got Jack Viney, a couple of young players as well in Chad Warner, Jai Newcomb, Josh Dacos, and Adam Chera. Jack Viney is the top of this ranking and tier here. Again, a little bit of it hinges on the availability of a Clayton Oliver. He went on a bit of a tear towards the end of last season when Oliver did miss some time. He had some big ceiling games there, so I don't mind him, or even as a bit of a handcuff if you have an Oliver reaching to get a Jack Viney there as well, just to kind of cover yourself off a bit there. And then a few young guys. Adam Chera and Dacos are at the bottom of this tier because I'm less confident in their role, but I think especially Chera probably has the highest ceiling of all of these guys. But the Carlton midfield to me is very difficult to get a grasp on, but I do like his scoring ability. Chad Warner and Jai Newcomb, I think, are going to be entrenched in the inside midfield.
I'd be interested to see how Chad Warner's game is impacted by some of those guys that Sydney are boarding.
Taylor Adams.
Yeah, I know Taylor Adams he's a little bit older, and Chad Warner's obviously going to be more of a guy that they want to continue forward with. But just interesting to see, like there's only so much ball to go around in there, and if Adams is getting first hands on it.
Do you think it could be a positive thing though? Like as a guy like Chad Warner, who's not really. He's not the liver. He's more of the...
Yeah, he does get out and then
the Bailey Smith kind
from
of thing.
stoppage, doesn't he, as well? Yeah, I mean, it could be a positive as well. It just we always talk about mouths to feed. Yeah. So if there's fantasy points to go around, only so many people can have it.
Yeah, I more see Taylor Adams affecting a player like a Luke Parker more so than a Chad Warner, but that's just my take. Sydney fans, if you're watching along, drop it in the comments. Who do you think... If anyone gets the bump or loses value with the additions of James Jordan and Taylor Adams, a lot of people I've heard a lot of talk about Jai Newcomb at Hawthorn. He was obviously a young player, came in through. I think he was one of the first mid-season draftee picks. I think he was the first pick a few seasons ago. What do you think about his game? I think he's a good footballer. I don't know if I see a super high ceiling when it comes to AFL fantasy pedigree. I've got him progressing, and I bumped his average from last year up, so he was ranked lower than this by average, but I don't think I can see him crossing into maybe even the triple digits this season, so I've got him more at a high 90s average in this projection. What do you think about Jai Newcomb? Do you have a difference of opinion for me there? Or
like you said before, I'm guilty of not watching a great deal of Hawthorn last year. It's interesting looking at his stats across the season. He did have 2 reasonably high ceiling games, but aside from that, it was pretty
they're a bit infrequent.
I mean, there's a 159 against the Bulldogs, which is fucking massive, but it's an anomaly. So, I think that. He's 22 years old as well, so I think there's the opportunity for a guy like that to continue to pop. But yeah, I think he still fits in that tier that you've got him in there around guys like Viney, Chera, Dacos. I think of all of those guys, if Chera puts it together,
I think he has the highest ceiling. Yeah. Him and Viney, but Viney's I think more based off what
Viney
happens
Kaiser,
to Oliver.
Yeah.
But Chera has the highest ceiling. I just really have no idea what's going on at Carlton. What about Dacos? Taylor Adams leaves.
Yeah.
Now, he didn't have the highest CBAs, but he did have some. Do you think that this means that Dacos gets more inside time, or is he still more of just that winger? Because he is a bloody good winger.
Oh, he's fantastic, isn't he? Let me pull up Collingwood's CBA.
Was he an All-Australian last year? Was he?
It wouldn't have surprised me. I think he has been, whether it was this year or... Yeah, find that out. But having a look at the Pies midfield mix, they do send a few different guys through there. And Dacos...
he was All-Australian on the wing.
Dacos saw... a few CBAs in the first part of the year, but it didn't look like it was something that they persisted with.
Yeah.
So, it could be, but when you're an All-Australian winger...
Yeah, it's hard to move you off a position like that when you're doing it so well.
He does play it so well. He's a really great link man for them. So
yeah. So I think if he did see more CBAs, he would have a bit more of a ceiling. But even on a wing, he can be a high 90s guy. I do think he's a really good player. So, he's in there at tier 5. The final tier to round it out to the top 40, number 34, the redhead himself, Matty Rowell at number 34. Now number 35, back-to-back Matts. I've got Matt Crouch. 36, Tom Mitchell. 37, Hugh McCluggage. 38, Paddy Cripps. 39, I've got Tim Kelly. And at 40, I've got Luke Parker. Had to make an adjustment recently with Tim Kelly going down with a hammy in the preseason. He's going to miss 2 to 3 weeks, so interrupted preseason on a player like Tim Kelly. He was in that previous tier beforehand with Newcomb and Warner and those boys, but I've dropped him down a little bit. What are your thoughts about Matty Rowell? Because there was a time, Luke, where Matty Rowell was the next coming of Jesus Christ himself, and he was every AFL Fantasy's wet dream. And
he wasn't he?
He's disappointed, but he has been improving. He's been getting better every season. Led the league in...
Marks, was it?
Marks? Yeah, Marks. Uncontested possessions. Tackles last season. So he's good at what he does. Is there still the opportunity for him to evolve his game and really blow up? He's still only 22.
I mean, I think there is. When you come in your first, whatever it was, 3-4 games and do what he did. So, I mean, it shows that he's capable of doing it.
Do you think Dimmer's going to love a player like Matty Rowell?
You'd have to think any coach would love a player like Matty Rowell, wouldn't you?
True.
But the question is, when you look at the top fantasy scorers in the league, they always have that really well-rounded game, don't they? It's not like there's a guy that goes out and averages 12 tackles and only takes a mark and he's a top scorer. It's like they have that well-rounded fantasy game. So I think it's pretty obvious if Matt Rowell's to take it to the next fantasy level anyway, he needs to add the uncontested possession. So maybe
we've seen it before. Someone like a Ollie Wines was very much in that mould. Yep. Someone like a Jack Steele was very much in that mould. There's someone else that's escaping me. I think maybe even a Dunkley was a bit like that, where these guys have those high tackle numbers and then something happens all of a sudden. Maybe it's a fitness thing or whatever, and they get better at popping out and get that uncontested pill. And I always think it's almost harder to... You don't see it go the other way as much. Like, you don't see someone who's not a tackler, uncontested, and then all of a sudden they become like this beast inside.
There's no seagulls going in there.
Yeah, sometimes you see it the other way. So to me, that's why he's at the top of this tier, because it would not shock me if at the end of this season we're talking about Matty Rowell as that like top 20 type midfielder, the way we were like 2 seasons ago after seeing his sort of first season in the AFL. But it's obviously, there's a bit of evidence to say he's not quite there yet.
Another thing that may work against him as well is Dimmer Hardwick at Richmond. Richmond were never a really high marks team. Last year, I know he was only there for half the season, but third last in marks. 2022, Richmond lower half of the table in marks. Yeah. So that could work against him in terms of he's trying to improve that area. But he's a 100%. Guy you're drafting a little bit later anyway. So
yeah, these are sort of your M4s and things like that. So sometimes you might have these guys on the bench. Sometimes they'll be on your field. So you can sort of play the matchups a little bit there as well. Talk to me about Tommy Mitchell. Are we just saying that he is what he is at this point, and the last season is basically what we're going to see from him? Is there any hope that he bounces back to the Tom Mitchell of old?
I don't suspect so. He's playing a role in a very successful team.
Fucking won a premiership, so.
So you're not going to be changing, are you? Yeah. He's done that portion of career where he was just pigging it, and now he's going to go add a few rings. Not rings.
Rings.
Medals.
Some medals.
Some danglies.
What do you, rings or medals? Which would you rather?
I think rings are kind of cool, but I don't know if it's cool because it's like Americanized.
Yeah.
There's, the NBA
It's
players
a bit
cool.
flashy. Yeah.
It's a bit flashy.
Yeah.
Danglies are pretty cool, but I guess rings you wouldn't go to a dinner party or something wearing a dangly, whereas
true.
You could go wearing
you could rock a little
5
ring,
rings,
yeah.
couldn't you?
Yeah, I reckon that'll sell me.
So you go rings?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
just have
Those
it on there,
big
go to
fucking
dinner.
chunky ones.
Just like
I don't think the AFL's got enough money to
probably not
spend
customising
on
everything.
Not the NBA level
Those things
stuff.
I reckon cost a fair bit. Last player I'll talk about in this tier is Hugh McCluggage. I've got him up here because I do think he sees a little bit of a bump, at least early in the season while Ashcroft is out, who I think he did his ACL in July, I want to say, so he's going to miss a fair chunk of the season. So I do think McCluggage is probably the one to benefit the most, but I don't see it being game-changing.
He should do a partnership with McDonald's, eh? Do a little,
Cluggage,
a little promo. What would you?
What was that Macca ad? That one where they do the "Hey Macca" and it's like McRae, and then there's
they did one. Did they do a partnership?
They did.
Oh,
the
they
AFL
did.
one.
Yeah, with the McGrath and all that. Was that a McDonald's thing?
It was a Macca's one.
Oh, was he in that?
I can't remember.
Maybe I've just suggested something that's already happened.
What a great idea, Luke.
Fantastic, mate. Come and get your McLuggage. What item of food would a McLuggage be?
It sounds pretty hefty. I reckon it'd have to be like a
fucking suitcase full of nuggets or something.
Yeah. Like the 50 nugget piece is the McLuggage.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, that's a good one there. We'll call him.
We'll take royalties if Mac has ever decided to do that.
He's now forever known as McNugget. So I think that there's a little bit of upside there from him, but again, you've still got players like Lockie Neal and Dunkley there, so he's not going to surpass those boys. So
also, when you're looking at teams that are successful and have been consistently successful, you kind of ask yourself, well, what's going to change? They're going to continue
keep doing what you're doing. So it's really those bottom teams that things might be a bit more open.
Yeah.
A couple of players that were unlucky to miss. A few classic relevant players here: Jordan De Goey, Cam Guthrie, Josh Ward from the Hawks, and Will Day. Will Day with his injury bumped him out of this one here, so he is someone probably drafting after the 40 as a bit of a bench option. And then Callum Mills is a tough one because if healthy, he would absolutely be in my top 40, but I don't really know how much time he's going to miss. And when he does come back, his role is still a little bit unclear. Obviously, they've added players like Taylor Adams and things like that, and I think that will affect him. We would know they do like to throw him around a little bit, so probably wouldn't reach into the top 40 for him, but I'm happy to grab him and sit him on my bench for a little while, see if things go all right.
That's fair.
So yeah, anyone else you think that I've completely forgotten about, or we'll let the commenters,
let the keen-eyed observer.
You can throw that down in the YouTube comments.
Better eye than me, I'm sure.
So those are our top 40. Oh, another player I actually just want to throw in there. Nick Martin is probably someone that was also very stiff to miss, just with news that he might potentially be playing
juicy
in a half-back role.
Juicy
so
half-back role.
If I get some confirmation on that, then he will definitely make the top
There was
40.
a stat that he was statistically the least accountable player in the league. They go play defense, mate.
Go back and play defense.
You played that at the ground, but don't worry about it, man.
Yeah, no, don't worry about it. So I think he could be a very juicy player if I can see confirmation of that. So let us know down in the comments, who do you think we have forgotten? And are you playing draft? And when is your draft? Let us know down there. Give this video a big old thumbs up. And next week we are starting the dangerous and terrifying journey that is the forward line. Talking premiums.
Could be short podcast.
Short. The premiums will be short, I'll tell you that much.
Yes.
Mid prices there might be a fair bit to talk about there. But we will see you guys then. Come in next podcast on Sunday, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.